This is Goose.
And welcome to Geek Channel. We're really looking forward to being back with you guys. Some personal stuff happened last week, so we're sorry about that. But before we continue anything else, happy month of Halloween! It's October! Yay! Woo! Best month ever! Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to be talking about lots of different stuff, but our first podcast of the month is actually going to be going over a topic that we both have had to have many conversations with friends and stuff over the years, so it's a very interesting topic. It is called GM101.
And it's about game mastering tabletop games. And,
not just tabletop, but just tabletopping, LARPing, running games is more what it's about.
And there's a lot of stuff that LARPing and tabletop gaming have in common, but since most of my experience has been with tabletopping, I'm probably going to spend most of my time talking about that. That's where I can relate most.
And a lot of my GMing experience and storyteller experience has come from actually running salon LARPs with other groups and stuff like that, as well as doing tabletop. So it'll be this should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you should be getting a wide spectrum of perspectives from nerds and myself today.
Yep. Okay, the first thing we want to talk about with you guys is a subject called railroading.
Railroading is when, as a GM, you have a very specific story in mind that you want your players to go through. So you focus them very narrowly on this one specific story. That's called railroading. And a lot of people consider railroading to be all bad. But depending on the sort of game you're playing, it might be exactly the sort of thing you're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, and there's also a major difference between a module and railroading, too. So that also needs to be bear in mind. If you're playing a written module, then there are certain steps you're going to have to follow. It's like a board game. But if you're playing an open world kind of thing, then that's a little bit different, and you need to allow for some wiggle room, in my opinion, but have a carrot for the players to follow.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. If you want players to follow a specific plot, offer them something they really want as the reward for it. Don't just try to force them to do it by having every NPC they come across tell them that they should do this. Instead, offer them multiple reasons to go ahead and pursue it. And that's why sometimes things like characters' backstories are important. It could be that long-lost cousin they're after or something along those lines. And a lot of that can even be used to help you get through modules if you're using them as part of your overarching campaign.
Not to mention the fact that a little railroading can keep the players focused and on task, but a lot of railroading can make players hate the game. A good way to handle that situation, if you're going to be doing a system with a mix of modules as well as free roaming, is make it so nothing is in super chronological order all the time. That they can pick and choose which adventures to hop on first, and then depending on what adventures they pick will determine the fame and stuff they have to carry over to the next one.
Yep, exactly. That's a great way to do it. Let the players choose where they're going next. Offer a whole bunch of options. Even if one of them is the option that will lead to them being railroaded, let them think it was their decision.
Oh, yeah. Like, for instance, I'm running 3.5 classic D&D game for our group. It meets, like, maybe twice a month because of scheduling. But what I did was I made a whole bunch of story arcs and modules, but made them non-linear. That way I could present to them based on the area they were in, and let the players just pick and choose which ones they actually wanted to touch on, and depending on... But if they don't do something, like if they skip over an entire adventure, there will be consequences for it because, well, that bad guy was left undealt with, or that treasure was left unfound. Just take that into account when you're running, and the players will, one way or another, figure out that there's some stuff that they should poke at with a stick and some stuff they shouldn't.
Yeah. As a player in that particular game, when offered a whole bunch of choices, my inclination is to do them all. So I'm pretty easy to guide if you're GMing me.
Yeah, well, you're also our druid, so you're pretty laid back anyway.
Yeah.
But in the Shadowrun game that Goose is running, which I adore, because we get to be all sorts of badass, If you guys don't know what Shadowrun is, it's a more futuristic, but kind of post-apocalyptic
No, it's
world.
It's
cyberpunk
fantasy.
Cyberpunk fantasy is a better way to explain it. There's a lot of problems with the universe, like written into the story. Like a lot of bad stuff happened, but at the same time, it's so much fun to run around in. You get to do so much crazy. But I love his game because it's just like, we're gonna go do this, and however you want to do it, you can do it. But this is the end goal, and which is another way to do something instead of like, here's the beginning, here's the end. You guys fill in the blanks on how you fulfill that end goal.
Yeah, Shadowrunners are urban mercenaries, so I give them a mission I want accomplished, and then let them do it however they see fit, bearing in mind that if they kill a whole lot of civilians, it's going to damage their rep.
Yep. Especially because we're fluffy bunny Shadowrunners.
Yeah, they are good guys.
Yep. Oh, and that is a term you're going to hear us throw around terms that we've been hearing most of our teenage and adult lives, and we will explain. Fluffy bunny is usually meant for when you are playing super good guys who don't kill innocents and that sort of thing. We generally play heroic games, but we have on occasion delved into more evil, crazy things. So that's we will try to explain terms as they come up.
Other terms that I use a lot are fluff and crunch. Fluff being the story and the plot of a game or a system. Crunch being the mechanics. So if I use those terms, then now you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yep. I'll probably use the same terms. Like I said, Goose and I grew up in the same generation of gamers. So it's this weird mix of old and new style gaming. So it's pretty interesting because our gaming group ranges from super new gamers to
people with more experience than us.
Yeah, by a lot.
Yeah.
The next topic we want to talk about are GM supplies. Okay. Every game master needs to have supplies of their own for game to not only help game move along faster, but to make sure that everybody is taken care of. Not saying you need to provide players with dice or anything, but having one extra set in case of a new player is always a good idea. Making sure that you yourself as a GM have the extra dice you need, pens, pencils, and that kind of stuff is also really important. But more specifically, there's a certain list of items that most GMs, when they get started anyway, don't realize they need that will help your game move along so much faster. First, index card. Index cards are going to cover a lot of what GMs need, like having the players make a base little stat thing. Like, these are my base stats, these are my base saves, and here, and you can even go so far as like have them make a certain number of sneak checks and so on. You know, skills that it's more fun when they don't exactly know when they're coming into play. Though some players don't like that idea, you can go that far with it, and it makes it really interesting and really streamlines a lot of stuff. Pencils and pens, obviously. Making a pack of baby wipes to clean off your battle mat, or bleach wipes.
Yeah, exactly.
You always want to make sure that you have, like I said, the extra dice, something to at least act like a GM screen, like a binder or something like that, even if it's not an actual Game Master screen. Partly because players don't need to see your dice rolls. You're the storyteller. Players need to trust that. But also because they don't need to know how many bad guys are rolling against them and stuff like that. It takes away some of the mystery of the game, I think, when players can see when you're rolling against them and stuff.
See, I like when the players see what I'm rolling against them so that they know to be scared.
It's because you're a sadist.
I just want them to have fun.
You're a sadist. If you could see the evil smile on Goose's face, you guys would totally agree with me. Another thing to consider is making sure that being a storyteller or a game master is really stressful. Antacids, headache medicine, and stuff like that should be part of your game master accoutrement. I found that I have needed them on several occasions because pizza and soda and beer at game night is usually par for the course for most places.
Yep, and while it's all delicious, it will mess your stomach up.
Horrendously. Though we tend to have tacos a lot, and with a mostly male gaming group, I can tell you that is so not a good idea.
It can get very stinky.
Oh yeah. I have learned to keep Beano in my bag.
One more thing I want to recommend for you guys out there who are GMing is page protectors. You can actually have your players put their character sheets in the page protectors, and then using a washable or erasable marker, they can keep track of their hit points and any expended powers, things along those lines. That way you're not actually wearing out the piece of paper and your erasers by erasing all the time.
Though I would suggest for those dry erase markers on the page protectors, because they're open on top, and using wet erase markers on your battle mats, because though
because you need wet erase for your battle mats.
Yeah, because the dry erase will stain, like really bad, and over time it'll just turn into a mess. Finding your own style is an important topic in this discussion, because you're going to have a million people tell you, this is how you should do it, no, this is how you should do it, no, this is how you should. You got to get in your own groove of things, and your friends and your gaming group will understand while you're trying to find your spot.
Yep, it takes a long time to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are as a GM, and how you can improve upon those weaknesses. It's mostly a matter of time and practice, and trying to know yourself.
So never give up, even if you mess up the first time. Like, I remember some of the first games I ran, and hoo boy! Even after I came back to running games after not running a long time, it took me forever to get back into the groove of things. Because, as we have discussed, I think, on this channel before, I'm not a crunchy GM. I go by the XP system, but the
milestone system.
Yeah, the milestone system for leveling and stuff like that. I reduce the amount of math as much as possible, because I think it's about the combats are cool, yeah, but I also want them to enjoy the stories and enjoy being the hero in their own right and that kind of thing, and everybody having their moment to shine. So I'm not a crunchy GM. It's one of the reasons why some of my first games that I ran were World of Darkness, because it's not a super crunchy system. It's very heavy roleplay, especially the LARP. But I still remember there's some of the first games that I ran, and they were just, oh my god. So for me, there are lots of helpful apps and stuff that help you calculate not only encounters, but loot and stuff like that, so everything is fair and balanced, and you don't underpay, overpay, or overpower anything that you're giving your players.
The most important thing from my perspective, GMing, is to tell a fun story with your players. Don't tell it to your players. Let them help shape the world. Like, that's one thing where I think tabletop RPGs are great, is you're not limited in the same way you are playing a computer game or a video game or a board game. Yeah, or even a LARP. Because you've got so much more freedom, because you are your gaming group is the most important people in their little part of the world. And even if they're not, you should still treat them as though they're the most important people in the game, because they are. They're the ones who are generating all the plot, or who are discovering the plot that you've set up for them.
And I actually agree 100% with Goose on that one, and that's kind of weird because we usually don't agree 100% on anything. But, I mean, not to say we're not good friends, because we really, really are. But he likes combat more than I do. I have a certain rule that I try to keep in mind in my head about how many combats should be in each session. And combat should happen based on what the players do or don't do, rather than planning to make sure that every game is chock full of combat. If the game session for me goes without entire combat because the players talked their way out of it and they had fun, I'm good.
Yeah, this feeds really well into our next segment, which is Know Your Group. So a lot of gaming groups, and I run for a lot of soldiers, or I've run for a lot of soldiers in the past, like to handle problems with violence. And when they do that, I try to allow them to do so most of the time. But I like to mix it up. For instance, I ran a game of All Flesh Must Be Eaten that took place in the Old West. And when they met the first monsters, they immediately pulled out their 6-shooters and shotguns and opened up on them. However, I didn't tell them, and they had to figure out the hard way that the monsters were bulletproof. And they had to start searching for different means to use violence to stop them. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being one of their most memorable gaming experiences. And it was a lot of fun for me because they were running around terrified of these monsters they couldn't stop with their 6-shooters.
Oh, yeah. One of the most memorable game experiences for me, not running, but having ran for me by one of my favorite GMs from my college days. And if they hear this, they will know exactly who they are and who I'm talking about. We were playing 0 level characters at the time because she really is just that evil, which I loved her for. And we were all kids, and we got attacked because we just happened to be walking around in the woods. And our squire, well, the dude who was trained to be a knight in our party, he was classified as a squire, finally got his first metal sword, and he was so proud, and a rust monster showed up. And we were terrified because if he lost that sword, it would mean he'd be in so much trouble. So we had to think of everything we could to save the sword from the rust monster. So we ended up beating it to death with sticks and rocks and dogpiling it. And it was just this long, grueling combat. And even though I said I don't like combat, it was hilarious because we were a bunch of little kids dogpiling this giant rust monster. And the combat was made fun because of the story that was intertwined with it. So there are lots of ways to run it.
Yep, but it's all about knowing your players and what they prefer. Other players might like a more investigative aspect to their games. They might be big fans of stuff like Call of Cthulhu, and so even if you don't want to run that system, even if you don't want to run that system necessarily, you should still remember what their preferences are when building your campaigns, so that you can kind of cater to them. Other times, you've got a lot of players, some of whom are new, and they don't really have an informed opinion on what they want to do. Make sure that you come up with stuff for them specifically, their specific character class or build to do, something that they can excel at. And even if they don't do a whole lot, as a GM, I find it important to tell people they're doing a good job a lot, because it gets smiles and laughs out of everybody at the table and helps them remember that they are here and they're having fun with their friends.
It also makes them feel appreciated and wanted and a part of the group rather than just another new kid.
Yeah, exactly. Speak to everybody like an individual when you're at the table. And yeah, that's my suggestion.
Yeah. Going into that, the next topic happens to just be not just about the dice. Okay, yes, we've said this like a million times. But it's not just about the skill checks. It's not just about the combats, because when you think tabletop game, the first thing that automatically pops in your head is combat rolls. Well, that's not the only dice rolls you can do. There are lots of dice being tossed around during a tabletop game. But I find that after a while, players get bored with a storyteller who says, okay, just give me a bluff check or a diplomacy roll or a search check, without having to actually role play through it at least a little bit. For me, I try not to run things like that. I try to make it as situational as possible and give the players a chance to role play through the situation before making dice rolls, or even letting them make the dice rolls, because honestly, if you can't start a good argument, how do I know your character is actually going to say the right thing? Yeah, your sheet says that you're awesome, but you may not have all the information you need to even make this roll, and yet you're going to try it anyway. So it's just one of those things that it's kind of about your preferences again as a storyteller. But for me, I try to make sure that the players are engaged in the game.
I like to go either way on this. There's times when I've got a player who wants to play the charismatic talker, who in real life is not a charismatic person at all.
This is true.
Yeah, and in that case, I'll say, okay, go ahead and make the roll. And I'll allow them to roll. Other times, I'll have somebody at the table who's playing a brute, and they are out of character, very charismatic. And this is another time when I'll say, go ahead and make the roll. They could come up with the most well-reasoned argument. However, we've got to remember that their negative charisma modifier, barbarian, is probably not going to be able to sell it no matter how well-reasoned his argument is.
Oh, yeah. Because, eventually he'll just get angry and smash their face in.
Or he just doesn't talk good.
This is true. This is true. Though we did have a very well-mannered barbarian that one time, which is really funny. It was way back when we first started gaming together, and we had a very well-mannered barbarian in our 5th ed game for a very short amount of time.
Nice.
It was hysterical.
Yeah, there's nothing saying that you've got to roleplay your barbarians as big dumb brutes. They can be big smart brutes. Big quick brutes.
Oh, yeah. And another big thing that we're going to get into now that everyone needs to remember, yes, you are technically in charge of the game. These people are your friends. Don't go overboard.
Yep. Yeah, this kind of can go hand in hand with railroading and things like that. Remember that you're here to sit down and have fun with your friends. You are not here to be their boss.
Or a dictator.
Yeah. You want to enjoy yourself while with them telling a story. It's group improvisation, essentially. And don't try to overpower your gaming table. That being said, don't let them walk all over you. If people are talking, playing video games or whatever while you're gaming, you tell them to sit down, shut up, and focus on what you're doing, or leave the table. Because that stuff is not just insulting to you as a GM, it's also really distracting to the other members of the gaming group when people aren't focusing on the game itself.
Not to mention rude.
Yeah, it's just very disrespectful.
An easy way to nip that in the bud, though, is to have posted somewhere near your general gaming area a defined list of, hey, when game starts, rules. When dice start rolling, these things happen because otherwise people get distracted. And that can be everything from phones on vibrate to phones in the basket or whatever. But another big thing on that same topic is you're going to have a lot of people in your group come in and out, all sorts of craziness. And there's always going to be certain stereotypes, and more like archetype personalities in a gaming group that you're going to have to some varying degrees. But here are 2 major ones that you need to, as a GM, be aware of and try to work around and with and whatnot to kind of make it easy. First is the lazy gamer. They can be a very charismatic person when they want to be. They can be a raging brute when they want to be. Whatever. It doesn't matter. But they'll just let the dice do the work for them and not really be engaged in the story and play on their phone or any number of other things when they're bored, which can be very distracting. So you need to make sure that you're engaging everybody, because lazy gamer will drag everybody else into his nonsense.
Yeah, and you don't need more distractions at your table than are already probably going to be present. Good ways to handle this particular type of player is to either try to feed them roleplay, feed everybody roleplay all the time, or if there's times when you just can't, then go ahead and let them be a distraction while you take whichever player or players it is away from the table to take them on their little side adventure or their private discussion. This way that person can have an outlet while not distracting from the game as a whole. When you get back to the table, you tell them, hey guys, back to game, and then you resume playing where you left off.
The second type of gamer archetype that you need to be aware of is the rule monkey.
Yeah, or rules lawyer.
I call them rule monkey because, and I'm actually going to explain this, because oftentimes they will get angry or aggressive when they think they're right.
Yeah.
Even when they're not. And that becomes very distracting and hard on other players, as well as you as a storyteller. Because having an argument right there at the table kind of kills the mood for everybody.
Yeah, it can drive people away from the table. My suggestion for handling this particular aspect is after the first time the player does it, next time you have a bathroom break, pull them aside and say, hey man, next time you have a disagreement with rules, can you just please write it on an index card and pass it to me? Or can you address it with me after game? That way I'll know for future games. But unless it is directly affecting something that their character is doing right here and there, right then and there. Right then and there, yeah, I can almost talk today. Then it's probably not the sort of thing you need to discuss while the game is going on. It's part of my idea, don't let the children see you fighting. You know? Another
archetype is the nosy Nancy gamer. And this is a player who goes off and does their thing, or is doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing, and then suddenly appears in everybody else's scenes or everybody else's stuff. They're just suddenly there, making comments and stuff like that. This one's a little more difficult to handle in some ways, but easier in others.
Yeah, this way you can handle it often by just asking, how the hell did your character get to this location? And they'll be like, well... And if they stutter too long, then you say, unfortunately, you're not here right now because you were off getting drunk with the orcs.
And oftentimes it's just people kibitzing, which it basically means two-sensing, putting in their input, even if it's not asked.
I will sometimes make comments on other people's scenes that I am not in, and then remind them, but I am not here. I was just being a jerk who's interrupting the flow of game.
Yeah. Which, as a storyteller, allowing it is okay, but reminding players that, now remember, you guys aren't actually there, so chill out on the comments, let them get through this. That's more or less all you really need to do, unless they continue to do it anyway. Then it's a time to take them aside and talk to them about it, because that can really not only affect gameplay, but as a storyteller, there's a lot going on at the table, so things can get really hectic and you're not able to keep up with everything. So you may forget that person could not have possibly been in that scene because they were on the other side of town getting drunk with some hobo or something. And what they said may have affected the scene and whatnot, and you allowed rolls, because the minute you allow rolls, they are in that scene. There's no going back at that point because they have affected the overall game.
Yeah, so just keep in mind if your players are the kind who like to interrupt other people's scenes, even to make jokes and stuff, that there's a time when it's appropriate and there's a time when it's not. And just keep that in mind when you're running games.
Now, I did say I was only going to mention 2, but I've already mentioned a third, so I'm going to mention 2 more that all storytellers need to be aware of. And I hate stereotyping, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I am trying to give good advice to storytellers about archetype personalities that pop up in almost every gaming group. And I have been gaming for years and have seen it so often that I don't want these players hurt. I don't want their feelings hurt, but I also don't want the storyteller to feel I can't talk today either. Feel defeated when they don't know how to handle those personalities. Because I've been in that position. I have been in several situations, especially when I was GMing in my younger years, where those personalities popped up. And I didn't know what to do or how to stop them, and they just kind of dug the game into the ground. And it was really hard because I had worked so hard on something, and we didn't get to enjoy it because people were being douchey. And that brings me to the next player archetype, the asshat.
There's some players that are just assholes that want to derail the game because they think it's fun. This can make it a lot less fun for the other people at the table. And these dudes are usually hard to deal with because they are, of course, at your table, so they're probably your friend. Sometimes just call them on their BS. Say, dude, got that, just play the game.
Yeah. Now, here's the bigger problem. Sometimes these players are close friends with almost everybody at the table except the storyteller. And that's where things can get really awkward because it can make you feel like you're overreacting to what they're doing. But if you're the one running the game, you're the one who needs to stand up and say, hey, this isn't cool. It's just, at the very least, it's distracting me from running the best game I can for everybody else. Will you please stop? Because sometimes they don't realize they're doing it, and it's just their personality that they like being chaotic about everything, or they're playing the alignment because they picked chaotic something. And so they're playing the alignment. But sometimes they're doing it on purpose. And unfortunately, I have actually personally run into that one. And that one's never fun, when they intentionally go in to mess up everybody else's characters as well as your story because they don't like you for whatever reason. And you just have to, as a storyteller, take a deep breath, a step back, and address your table at that point and be like, hey guys, this person has admitted that they're doing this intentionally now. We may want to consider not having them a part of the group. But never just banish somebody from the table until you have all the facts. Until you know what's going on. And always talk to your group about it before you do anything.
This is another thing where I said, don't let the kids see it, argue. Try to address this situation with a problem player. Personally, don't do it in front of the group. Because this can embarrass people and lead them to leave your gaming group, even if you don't want them to. So a lot of these times when situations come up, just talk to them privately, you and them. And always try to crack a joke at the end of whatever you're talking about, because criticism is hard enough to receive for a lot of people, and any way you can ease the tension is very valuable.
Now, but again, don't be afraid to, if they just don't stop after you've talked to them, to talk to the group. But don't do it as a group, at least initially. Talk to them individually and see if anybody else is having a problem with how this person's behaving. Because if nobody else is seeing the problem, and then it might really just be your imagination. But it's one of those things that you have to handle delicately as a storyteller. It's never cut and dry, black and white kind of situation. Which brings me to another type of gamer. And this is not a bad gamer. Bear in mind, none of these players are bad or evil or trying to hurt people intentionally, unless you're, intentionally being an asshat. Then you deserve to be slapped. But there's the shy/lonely gamer who likes to play lone wolf characters or socially awkward characters because they themselves are loners and socially awkward. It's not that they are intentionally not interacting in game, they just don't know how and they feel awkward about it. This is where you as a storyteller need to ease them into more plot and stuff like that. Don't just throw it at them, but be deft at handling the situation. Delicately bring them more into plot and get them interacting and being more social. Because if you just try to throw them in the deep end head first, most players don't respond well to it.
A good way to do this is to have them be the person who receives some crucial bit of information. That way they have to share it with at least some of the members of the party for the mission to go forward.
Oh yeah. Although sometimes they will keep it to themselves until just before we're all about to die.
And then, And then it's just even better. Because
then it causes drama, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
But one of the final notes that I want to say about this particular topic is what happens at the table stays at the table. What is happening outside of the table or off the table stays off the table. You have to make sure your players remember game drama does not equal real life drama. And real life drama should not be brought into play. The minute you do that, you ruin game for everybody. And if you as the storyteller are having some stuff going on in your life, then maybe you shouldn't be running that night. Maybe you should let somebody else do it or play board games or something, but know your own limits and make sure you are aware of what's going on, at least loosely with your players, so you know when people are up for stuff and when they aren't.
All right, folks. Well, thank you for listening. This has been Bald Mongoose.
And this has been the Nerd Girl, and we are Geek Channel.
All right, take care.
Bye!